Covering. I'm Stephen Ben Danoon, and you're watching Danoon Institute of Biblical Research, a production of IsraelReturns.com. Earlier today, I was able to catch up with Mark Biltz, who's here in Jerusalem at this time, someone that I have met in the past and corresponded by email and by phone. We found we had a lot in common, and it was a pleasure to get to sit down with him and interview him about the blood. Well, we know that one blood moon just happened. It was visible to the United States. It happened on Passover, but as well as the next three that are coming up, this Sukkot, next year again on Passover, and then the final one on Yom Sukkot, which will happen in 2015. I think you might enjoy this interview. Right now it's raining here in Jerusalem. We came back up after the interview with Mark from Tel Aviv. It was pouring like a monsoon. It looked like Florida rains at their heaviest downpours. Was able to catch a little bit of the lightning as it struck over the old city there. Went up on the Mount of Olives and took some visuals there of the camera there. Thought I might share that with you a little bit just so you can see what it's like. And it was kind of ironic because the other day it was overcast and then the sun broke out. Clouds moved away, and I felt a little disappointed we didn't have any rain, and knowing that this area needs rain. And so I just bowed my head and humbly asked the Lord if He could be so kind to bring the rain so that His creation here in Jerusalem could be blessed by His presence. God bless you. I hope you enjoy the interview. Mark, you're the guy that actually discovered the blood moons and what was going to happen in 2014 and 2015. And I know that when we talked about this on the phone a little while back, I asked you which one did you think was more prominent of the two, and you mentioned 2015.
Yeah.
And I'd like you to elaborate on that some, or even go into the different things about the blood moons, your feelings on that.
Yeah. Well, to me, 2015 is the most significant because it's the culmination, it's the last one, the grand finale on the Feast of Sukkot that is seen in Jerusalem.
Yes.
But what makes it so incredible, well, it all goes back to Genesis 1:14. It plainly said God created the sun and the moon to send signals on Passover and Sukkot. It says for the Moedim.
That's right.
And, most English people read seasons and think winter, spring, summer, fall. So I just take God at His word. He said He created them to send signals on His feast days. Here they're coming on His feast days. And from a scientific standpoint, when you look at the patterns, look what happened in 67, look what happened in 48. So I just say, hey, we need to be watching and praying to see what potentially could be coming. And again, I'm not prophesying anything's going to happen. I'm just looking at the patterns, saying this is what I've seen happen in the past. Right. 48, you have a war involving Israel. 67, a war involving Israel. There could be a chance, a high probability of a war involving Israel. But the thing that gets me is in the book of Joel, where it talks about the moon turning black, or to blood, and not
right.
seen. It's in the context of God judging the nations who have parted His land. And so I see this as a warning. I think these 4 blood moons are warnings to Israel not to divide their land, warning to the nations that better not divide their land or there will be consequences.
Absolutely.
So, but this last one that is seen on the Feast of Tabernacles is a super moon. Okay, some people don't know what a super moon is, but here's the Earth. The moon's orbit is elliptical, so it's far away and it gets close and far away and gets close. When the moon is at its closest point for the month,
right.
It's called being at perigee. But when it's at perigee, it's not always a full moon. It could be a new moon when you don't even see it, so it's not considered a supermoon. So the first thing you have to do is, what are the odds when the moon is at perigee? It's a full moon. Okay, if it is a full moon, then it is known as a supermoon, and it appears 14% larger because it's so close to Earth. So look at the odds. Number 1, you have to have a full moon. Number 2, it's at perigee, and in 2015, it is at perigee for the entire year. It's at its closest point for the whole year.
Wow.
It's on the Feast of Tabernacles. It is seen in Jerusalem, and it is a total lunar eclipse. So it's a super blood moon. And on top of that, it's a Shemitah year. And in Deuteronomy, see, the men were only required to be Jerusalem 3 times a year. Right. Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. But the women and children weren't required. But every 7th year in the Shemitah year, specifically it says on the Feast of Sukkot, every man, woman, child, foreigner, stranger had to come and hear the King of Israel read from the Torah. So here we have, next year on Sukkot, a super blood moon at its closest point for the whole year on Sukkot, seen in Jerusalem in a Shemitah year.
Where everyone will be here.
And you're going to have all the ICEJ, International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, all these people from all the nations are going to be here in Sukkot. Can you imagine how booked out all the hotels are going to be when everyone realizes they're going to have a super blood moon on Sukkot in a Shemitah year?
Well, if it's booked up, you can come stay with us.
Oh, thank you.
But you know, that's fascinating. And not only that, one of the main feasts that God requires we see in the millennium is the Feast of Sukkot.
Exactly.
You know?
Zechariah 14, the nations that don't keep it, they get the plague and no rain. And for me, when people realize these feasts were dress rehearsals, that's
Yes.
what they were, dress rehearsals. And I ask people, how many of you want to be at the wedding of the Messiah? Oh, yes. Well, then I say, well, then why don't you want to be at the dress rehearsal? You know,
Exactly.
And Sukkot is a dress rehearsal, you know, for the reign of Messiah. Why would you want to be here?
You know, when you mention Zechariah 14, I think about Zechariah 12 as well, because we know that this is when our people, because both of us are Jewish in our backgrounds, and this is where the prophecy speaks about them recognizing the one that had been pierced. I know in Hebrew we say thrust through, but it's still the same thing. It was done by a spear. And one of the things that God really dealt with me on, more actually recently about this, is that when you look at the family names, you have the family of David, the family of Nathan, the family of Levi, and the family of Shimei. And it's no coincidence because God promised that he would bring the house of Judah home first, because they were the ones that were here when Yeshua came the first time. But when Yeshua comes, or when he came the first time, the house of Israel, for the most part, was not here. They were in exile. So he brings back the house of Judah, and David and Nathan are both from the tribe of Judah. The Levites being the tribe of Levi, and Shimei is from the tribe of Benjamin. Which is odd because when Joseph takes and puts the cup in Benjamin's bag, it's a twofold purpose. One, showing that he was not guilty, just like our people of today are not guilty of the blood of Yeshua. We never handed him over, but yet that cup is in our bag to say, what are we going to do as Jews about this? And yet at the same token, it also prophesied in the future that it would be the tribe of Benjamin that would also be crying out for his blood, because it represents the communion cup where he was rejected. And then I look at the story of David, you know, because you see Shimei there, and when David when he was rejected by Absalom, who never recognizes his father as being the king. The same thing with Israel. It's like a type of Israel. They don't recognize that he was indeed the king of Israel. So it's a coup, so to speak, but instead of David putting down his son, he goes out, crosses the Kidron Valley, goes up on the Mount of Olives, and weeps over it with his head covered. In fact, I know that in the Jewish belief, that's one of the places we cite is why that we cover our heads. And of course now, I do it more for the sake of our people, not for the sake of tradition. But at that moment there, I used to always wonder when Absalom finally was killed, why did David weep so much over his death? And he says, if I could have died for you, I would have done it. But he was a type of Yeshua the whole time, you know, because Yeshua was like that. When, you know, he did what David couldn't do. He gave his life for his sons that rejected him and hated him. And Shimei, though, was the one that cursed him coming up on the mountain. See? And he's throwing stones at him. But when David gets ready to come back, it's interesting because he tells the two priests not to go with him. Stay there. And they were to do a work, which reminds me of the two witnesses. Because he said they had to get Israel in one mind and one accord before David could return. And Shimei actually meets him right down there at the river. And of course his men want to kill him, you know. It's just like you mentioned to me earlier, we was talking about the Jews that, or no, the Christians in the story of Ruth, how her sister is a type of the Christian that rejects the Jewish people. And that's what it was. That's the so-called Christian that was with David at that time. Rejecting, and let's kill him for what he did. And he says, no,
Yeah.
No one will die today. And he had mercy.
Right.
And that's why I believe God shows Shimei right there in Zechariah.
Sure, I think so. And as far as being disguised, Joseph being disguised from his brothers, why did they recognize him? He looked Egyptian.
Exactly.
And I think the big problem with Christianity today, and they ask me why the Jews don't recognize Jesus, because they're presenting an Egyptian Jesus. You know, he's not Jewish. His name's Yeshua, you know, and he loves Torah, and he keeps the Moedim, and he eats kosher, you know, and so Christians can't figure out why the Jews don't recognize Yeshua when they're presenting a non-Jewish Jesus.
You know, Mark, that reminds me to something that I haven't actually spoke about it publicly as of yet, but we hear so much, or I look at it like this here. Two things that I think about. One, why does God have to send two witnesses to Israel? Why not two Baptists? Why not two Pentecostals? Why not two Charismatic? Or whatever the case may be, but he has to send two witnesses. And then we have the scripture that plainly says that when God is seen with us and the people recognize that, 10 men of the nations or the Gentiles will take the whole of the skirt of one Jew and say, we've heard God is with you, teach us your ways.
Right.
Well, if in modern day Christianity, if we have it all or we were doing it right, why then is it we're seeing now that the Gentile believers are grabbing a hold of the Jewish people and say, show us, teach us your ways.
Exactly.
So,
Well, I think it goes back to the prophecy of Jeremiah where the Gentiles are going to say, we've inherited lies and vanity. You know, our fathers have taught us things that don't profit. And so, you know, I see a big revival coming, you know. And the amazing thing is, to me, is this, though, too. Joseph had everyone leave before he revealed himself to his brothers. And I think it was a big shock to his brothers when he revealed himself that he was Jewish, you know. And I think it's going to be just as a surprise to Christians that he's Jewish as much as it is to the Jews that he was Jewish.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. And you know, the thing is I know with a lot of the rabbis here, they have, you see more and more they're looking into his past. They see that his brothers kept the laws of Moses, and which is kind of unusual. I know that's something that, like Tovia Singer, Rabbi Tovia Singer, I don't know if you know Tovia, but we've been discussing privately whether or not we would do a debate together. And he told me, he says, it's a little bit awkward for me. He says, because I do respect a lot of your ministry. He says, where I don't have a respect like that for most Christians.
Right.
So, and he really reminds me of Paul, when Paul was Saul, because he's so hard persecuting the church, but yet it seems like there's something inside of him that may end up believing who Messiah is.
Well, the thing is this, it's the way the Christians have treated the Jewish people. I'd be upset as well.
Yes.
You know, I mean, my goodness, the Jewish people don't want Jesus to return. He's the guy that's been killing them for the last 2,000 years, his followers.
Exactly.
You know, so I can understand the animosity he has.
And we both share that in common in our family past, you know, Holocaust victims and stuff, left and right. And but Mark, is there anything else you'd like to say? I want people to be able, we're going to post on here your website and how they can get the books that you've written. I like the main source. I know that there's other people written on blood moons since you first brought that out, but you know, especially when I see the revelation that God has given you. I mean, I can see now why Lori Cardozo Moore said, you know, you two should connect together, you know, because it's like we have the same thought pattern in a lot of ways.
Well, the thing for me, the big thing really, is getting on God's calendar. Christians are on the wrong calendar. I'm serious.
You're right.
People don't realize 2 years from now, Easter is a month before Passover. How do you celebrate the resurrection a month before he dies? They're on a totally different calendar. It's like this herky-jerky thing. You know, it's like you're not in sync. You're not on God's calendar. You know, it's the Moedim are like cycles. They're festivals, and they're to go smoothly. But because of Constantine deciding he wanted to go on the total solar calendar to determine the resurrection, because he didn't like the Jews determining it, you know, he came up with his own calendar. And we've been deceived and lied to, and we're on the wrong calendar. So that's why not only do we have the book and the DVD about the blood moons, but the important thing is, if you're not on the right calendar, they're not even going to be seen at the right time. People aren't even going to make the connection.
Exactly. I agree with that. And And a lot of people don't realize too, Mark, and I know that I believe you realize a lot of this too, that the true Jewish believing church, and this was a point that Rabbi Singer brought up that he was trying to debate, that the Pharisees of today that are living here today are the Hasidic Jews or
Sure.
the Haredi Jews. And he says, why has God kept them together? Now, of course, we know the reason for that, because God had called them to offer the sacrifice, and they kept God's
Sure.
word. They did what Moses saw in the prophecies by striking the rock,
Right.
and in him, in Yeshua, was that water of life. It was the Eitz Chaim from the Garden of Eden that had to be brought out. So they had to offer him. So therefore, they're back here, and God kept them together. But his argument is, why then is not the Jewish believers that believed that Yeshua was Mashiach in the beginning, where are they at? Well, the thing is a lot of people don't realize that the Vatican was out there slaughtering them.
Oh yeah.
They raised up it's where the birth of the Muslim religion comes from.
Sure.
And so then it was just to try to wipe out true Christianity,
Right.
what true believers really were. And that's, like you said, that's where Constantine brings all this in,
Sure.
and then all these traditions, and this is where we get the pagan holidays and things like that down through the ages. So you're right. We definitely, it's important to teach, and I'm sure you've heard the same. I've heard a lot from people tell me, they say, when we see that scripture about 10 Gentiles take the hold of the skirt of a Jew, they say, we feel like when we're listening to what God is revealing to you, this is what we're getting.
An interesting take on that. It says 10 men from all the nations.
Yes.
What they're saying that really is 700, because there's 70 nations, and it's 10 from every nation.
Amen.
And 10 times 70, it's not one from 10
Yes.
nations. It's
Yes.
10 from every nation. And so you're taking, if there's 70 nations, going back to Genesis,
right.
you have 700 people grabbing a hold of the tzitzit of one Jew.
Even the tzitzit, I think, Brother Mark, I think that
Sure.
shows that another type, like I mentioned to you earlier about the story of Ruth. When God gave the commandment for us not to glean from the four corners of the fields,
Right.
and it was to be left for the Gentiles,
Right.
we see that God gave a sign, a prophetic sign,
Right.
that the Gentiles would play a major role in bringing the Jewish people back to their homeland.
Sure.
And I think the same thing applies to the tzitzit, when he had us put that on the four corners.
Sure.
Just like Yeshua, when he makes the prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, or sanctify your name.
How do you sanctify your name? By bringing all the people back.
They have to come
Yeah,
back.
that's exactly right.
Because,
Exactly.
and so when he had us praying that, he was having the world pray for the return of Israel to their
Right.
homeland.
Right.
And so many people miss that. So Mark, it's been
Hey,
a pleasure.
great. Thank you so much for having me with you.
Amen. God bless you,
Bless
your
you.
work, and I trust that all the support that you need, God will provide every bit of it.
Well, thank you so much, Steve.
God bless you, my
Blessings.
brother.